Welcome to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. Today, Ross Clark from chartsandmarkets.com runs down the major markets. There was a quick shakeout and then a recovery. He takes a close look at crude and has a special offer for our listeners. InsideTrackTrading.com President Eric Hadik examines the cycles the various markets and commodities are in, including the stock markets, gold, silver, the battery metals, the US dollar, interest rates, and geocosmic events like earthquakes, solar flares, and volcanoes. VRTrader.com's Mark Leibovit wonders if there's more behind what's going on in the markets than the government admits. He chats about the US dollar, gold, lithium, palladium, green energy, and Bitcoin. He also has a special offer for you. Plus, at the end of the show, we'll have a company showcase update from American Manganese President Larry Reaugh. We'll talk to Ross Clark right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Reaugh, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to This Week in Money, the source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Clark from chartsandmarkets.com, where you'll find insightful market commentary and timely technical analysis. You can find him on Twitter at ChartsByRoss. Welcome back to This Week in Money.
Pleasure to be with you, Jim.
Ross, a kind of a quick shakeout in the markets, but how did the weekend?
Early part of the week, a couple of bad days there got a hit. First part of it, rumors about maybe tapering back a little bit as far as the Fed is concerned, and then, was it going to happen or not going to happen? This month is just a bunch of nonsense because eventually it will. A week ago, markets looked vulnerable. I mean, all the little pieces you could look at, the divergences in the advanced decline line, the Dow theory feeling to have confirmations on the upside. All the pieces were starting to fit in for a bit of a rollover. And, by the middle of the week, we had a decent break, and we made it down to that 50-day moving average, which has just become the support level basically since the November election. When we turned on a dime back then, I think we've had 10 or 12 corrections since then. Only 2 of them overlapped the 50-day average. The other ones, just like the one this week, came back, kissed, and turned again. Until we see one of these tests that has a failed rally afterwards, and that would be where, you have your first hard break, you retrace maybe 50 to 60% of it, but you stay below the short-term moving averages like the 20-day. Until you start to see that, this trend is still up, but we are, in the season where trouble can happen as we move into September, October, because we know November tends to be your best month of the year, but that's only because things are pretty rough usually in September, October. So, equity market-wise, you've got some sectors that are leading still on the upside. Technology is doing really well. Healthcare, the staples, having a pretty good run. Interesting, we've got some buy signals in here on Amazon, which is about the weakest FANG stock that's out there. It's probably good for maybe a 6 or 7% run, which when you're talking about a stock that trades over $3,000, that might be a reasonable trade for an option trader. But so as I say, weakness in the one of the big names, which has been sitting around and doing nothing since July, August of last year.
What's going on with crude?
Crude is we look at this 10-year cyclic action in crude, and starting the big picture here is important because we start with typically strong rallies coming out of the fourth quarter of the 8th year of each decade, all the way back to 1978. Coming out of that fourth quarter, you get a good rally, and it will last 2 years or more. And last year, we had the first part of the move off the bottom very nicely, up over 50% initially. Then COVID came along and just knocked the wind out of everything. But since then, you ended up with that methodical, sustained rally once again, as you would hope to see in that 2-year time window. By the time we got to this spring, we had 2 windows of opportunity for a high, one being September and then the other being out to October. The key was that you had to hold above the 20-day moving average, because we had started to move into that exponential phase on the upside. So what you watch for then is any change in momentum. And that happened in July, middle of the month. We broke below $72 and got a very quick break back down under 66. So that was indicative then of the cyclic high, so this now is the fourth time that we've had this rally, going back 40-odd years. And so we've got that cyclic high in. We had the first hard break, and we had a retracement rally back to $74. That has failed once again, and as of this week, we're under 62. So you got a rolling top up here. This typically will take the better part of 3 months before it can find a bottom. So I think we're looking out somewhere into October or later before you can have what I would consider to be a viable longer-term bottom. Put together a piece of research here at the tail end of the week that if people are interested, we'll send it out to them. They can see just what type of technical work we do. Some guidelines as we move through the next calendar quarter. People might be able to take advantage of it.
Do you have a special offer for your listeners?
Well, if they go onto the website under sample reports, we will have the crude oil there as something that they can draw down upon. We'll make the request, and we'll have it out to you within 48 hours.
Ross, thank you so much for being on This Week in Money.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Ross Clark from chartsandmarkets.com, where you'll find insightful market commentary and timely technical analysis. Find him on Twitter at Charts by Ross. Coming up, Eric Hadik, next on This Week in Money.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision. Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com. This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
My guest is Eric Hadik, CEO and President of InsideTrackTrading.com. He's speaking to us from the Chicago area. Welcome back to This Week in Money, Eric.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Jim.
Eric, Inside Track, spelled INSIIDE, TrackTrading.com. Why the double I, and can you explain a little bit about the company?
Well, at its beginning, the acronym INSIDE was intended to describe the primary market sectors that were being addressed, and that included indexes, the dollar, inflation markets, which was really commodities as a whole, interest rates. I think it's a dollar already. The SI was stock indexes, and then the E was energy markets. So it was an acronym. It has since expanded a bit from there, but that was the reasoning for that spelling and that the way it's set up. And so we provide technical and cyclical analysis on those markets, those market sectors, and the overall economy, wider financial and macroeconomic trends and cycles on a subscription basis.
Eric, the stock market has been I don't know, I say flopping around. It doesn't seem to want to go much higher. We've had a few downturns. What's your reading on what's going on with stocks right now?
Well, I still think that we are in a broad topping process, and part of that I link to a cycle that I have discussed with you before, and it's this very consistent 16-month cycle that has timed multi-month, often multi-quarter peaks in the market. The last two prior to current one were in September, October of 2018, then in January, February of 2020. And in a majority of stocks and the overall market, that cycle recurred in May, June of this year. And if you look at the majority of stocks, that's when they did peak. You still have your lingering some tech stocks and a few others that are setting new highs, but the broad market has been through this topping phase, and there were a couple of more vulnerable or dangerous times that I identified based on not only cycles but a lot of price timing indicators. And the first period like that was from late June into July 19th or 20th. We saw a pretty good downdraft then in a lot of the markets. Second one was from early August into August 19th or 20th, kind of really expected to repeat that quick sell-off that we saw at the same time in the last 3 months. If you look at the Dow Industrial Average, between May 14th and 19th, June 14th and 19th, July 14th and 19th, it had a substantial sell-off, and that's why that and other indicators that had corroborated it is why I was looking for a similar August 13th to 19th sell-off and a spike low into there. But I think that's setting the stage for something a little more significant that we could see in September. And there's specific indicators and patterns that I'm looking for between this August 19th, 20th time frame and early September to corroborate or reinforce that outlook. And if the markets cooperate, then I think we could see something a little more significant in the middle half of September to the downside.
Why is it September always seems to be the scariest month on the stock market?
Well, I think you have a lot of the coming back from vacation type of volatility that, the old adage of sell in May and go away, although it's not always a completely accurate one, it does describe the general mentality and psychology of June, July, August, those summer months being when participation sometimes diminishes a bit, and then you get September when things really kind of kick back to life, and depending on what fundamentals have started to evolve over the summer and what things are kicking in when business is kicking in, when really in many respects things come back to life in September from a school business standpoint, and so you get the markets coming back to life, so to speak, as well. And it's just a matter of which direction that new life is seen.
What's going on with commodities right now?
I think that you're seeing a topping process in a lot of commodities. You've already seen it in the majority of them. And there's a couple factors at play there. One is one that I've tried to really emphasize or highlight in a lot of discussions I've had like this. And that is that in really, say, May through July of this year, all of your inflation year-over-year type calculators and indexes and indicators were compared to one of the lowest points in the economy and spending and everything else that we saw a year earlier in April, May, June of 2020. So naturally you're going to get the appearance of something even more extreme than perhaps what we had. But you also had a lot of shortages created by the pandemic and labor shortages that then created commodity shortages. And so there's this lag effect on price. You know, you look at things like lumber that 2 years ago was trading around $300 a board foot on the commodity markets, and then a few months ago spiked as high as $1,700 a board foot, almost sextupling in value. And now, since then, you've seen a dramatic drop once that shortage started to be mitigated, things started to return a bit to normal. And you're seeing that with a lot of commodities, and I think that that's going to continue to play out. You take lumber, for example, and on the current futures markets, the November is really the primary one in focus now, but it's back down to less than $500 a board foot. So you had it multiply 5 or 6 times in price into early May, and now as things have returned to normal within 3 months, it's plunged, lost 70% of its value, and you'll probably see things that has an impact on start to also go through a similar cycle, and one in particular would be housing. I know that in our area and many areas of the United States that you had builders, that you had the demand for homes really kick up in the last 6 months. Prices started to really skyrocket. But at the same time, builders were taking deposits and selling homes, and they would pour the foundations, but they were not going to frame them until the cost of lumber came down. Well, now over 3 months, you've had lumber plummet. All that building is starting to kick in. So what do you think you'll see in a couple months when all of a sudden this big supply of homes starts to hit the market? Then in a lot of these areas, you'll probably see some of that real estate bubble start to at least taper off. A bubble's not really an accurate term because in most of the areas I'm referring to, it was a good spike, but nothing that has characteristics of a true bubble, but certainly a bit of a parabolic move that could see what you normally see after a parabolic move, a quick, sharp pullback. And that's just that on a broader basis is what you're seeing in a lot of commodities. But I do think there's going to be exceptions based on their own fundamentals that will see additional surges over the next 6 to 12 months. But right now you're in a little bit of a deflationary phase of that.
Is there really a labor shortage? I know before the pandemic hit, a lot of employers were finding it hard to get skilled workers, at least. Now they're saying people don't want to come back to work because they're still getting government handouts. Is that a factor, and does that go in cycles that you can predict?
I have not really done a lot of research on labor shortages like that. I have heard and read some of the same factors that you're citing there, and that you have both the subsidies that have discouraged it, and there's also just the still the fear of the pandemic that has probably inhibited a lot of your lower wage workers from saying, okay, is it worth all this risk to go back to this $20 an hour job or $15 an hour job? And if they can do something else or try to bridge the gap, then I think they're doing it. And it may be a function of whether the labor market was paying what's what's deserved for that. And I'm not advocating one side or the other, but the market tends to reflect inequities and over time correct them. And it may be a factor that some of those lower wage jobs really demand a little bit higher wage. And if a business can't afford to pay some employees a moderate living wage, maybe it's not a viable business. And you're seeing that the market really resolving that issue as well.
What's going on with gold and silver?
You're seeing gold and silver just go through a much broader topping cycle than some of these, than like I was just discussing in, say, stock market on a monthly basis. I think gold is doing what I pretty much talked about for the last 5-6 years, and that was that you have this recurring 40-year cycle, and in most of those cases, you've got a battle between gold and fiat currencies. This time you also had digital currency in the mix. And in many of those, you see the value of gold, at least based in, say, dollars, rally. And it often rallies during the second half of the decade. So look at the late 70s, look at the late 2010s. And often peaks at the very beginning of the next decade. And you've seen that in gold right now, similar to 1980. You've got this, what should be at least a 1 to 2 year peak back in August of 2020. And you now have the dollar showing a bit more signs of stability this year. And I've discussed about a 3.25 year cycle in the dollar that bottomed in the second quarter of this year. And so I think that you're going to see the dollar slowly come out of its doldrums and move a bit higher. That could be linked to the perception of interest rates here in the U.S. And as the Fed continues to talk about speeding up the elimination of stimulant and tapering, and the perception that rates are going to eventually move higher, which often brings money into that currency. So you're getting perceived fundamentals and future fundamentals already starting to appear that are validating the cycles. So if you see the dollar start to edge higher and continue to, and if you see interest rates or the perception of interest rates start to move higher, those two things are a real burden on gold. And so you've seen gold struggling for the last 4 to 6 months, and there could be more of that in store.
What do you see ahead for the U.S. dollar and interest rates?
Well, pretty much what I was saying is I think that the dollar set a 1 to 2 year bottom in the second quarter of this year, 2021, and I'm looking for the dollar to move progressively higher into next year and possibly into 2023. Doesn't mean that that's any major skyrocketing value. If anything, it's more likely that it just heads back towards the upper end of a multi-year trading range. And so even though it's a wide consolidation, if the dollar index moved back towards 100 or 102, which is where it saw peaks in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2019, and 2020, then it would still be staying in the same trading range, but from a low of 89 or so that we hit earlier this year, that would be a substantial enough move to have an impact on things like gold. But really, like I said, from a broader perspective, it really is a 6 to 7 year trading range in the dollar between 88, 89 on the low end and maybe 102 on the high end. And as far as interest rates, I think that you still have the 4 year cycle that I have discussed before and which very accurately pinpointed the July 2020 peak in bonds and notes, which was a low in interest rates. That 4-year cycle times precise highs in July of 2016, 2012. It's just been a very consistent cycle, and based on where you are within the overall trend and within the cycle progression tool I use, that July 2020 peak told me to look for about a 2.5-year upswing in interest rates, downswing in bonds and notes. And so I think that interest rates are going to continue to edge higher. And again, first it's the perception of interest rates, even if many of your actual interest rates haven't changed. It's that forward perception that drives the markets. And so bonds and notes set a major top in July of 2020. I was looking for a secondary high right here in July of 2021. And from there, I think that you're going to see bonds start to head lower, interest rates start to edge back up, and that stretch into next year and probably into 2023.
Inflation in the U.S. officially over 5%, in Canada over 3%. Of course, we know the government official numbers exclude things like energy and housing and taxes. Is inflation going to continue at this rate? And if it does, will that put pressure on increasing interest rates?
I don't think it's going to continue at this rate, and I go back to the comments I made earlier. If you're comparing on a year-to-year basis, the lowest point you've seen in years with the highest point you've seen in a few years, it's going to look far more dramatic than if a year ago your numbers were still middle of the road, and now you're comparing some moderately higher numbers. I think the proportion and the percentage change is really magnified by that sharp drop in the second quarter of 2020, and now comparing year-over-year things in second quarter and third quarter of 2021. So you almost have to have even if all your numbers just returned to normal this year, on a year-over-year basis, they would look dramatically higher. So you factor all those things I mentioned earlier, and many of them shortage-driven price spikes, and a lot of those have been alleviated, and I think you're going to see that start to show up in the numbers over the coming months and quarters. You even look at something like the oil markets and energy, crude oil, that it too was projecting a 3 to 6 month peak in late June, early July, and so crude since then has now come off about 10-12%, and I expect it to continue lower, probably down to around the $56 to $58 a barrel mark. And so even your energy prices are going to start showing up as a declining factor in inflation in the coming months. But it takes time from when you see that first top and price sell-off. Take some time before that starts to factor into month-over-month and quarter-over-quarter numbers.
We've been tracking crude oil for over 100 years. Is there any way to track alternative energy, wind and solar?
I don't know, other than a contrasting basis, but I would say with something like that, if you were looking at shorter-term cycles and seeing how they play out, but it would be difficult to, if that's your primary means of analyzing it, it would be difficult to really have high confidence in cycles like that.
Concern and focus on battery metals, again, a relatively new thing. Is there any way to track lithium, cobalt, nickel, lead, zinc?
I think some of your broader metals and minerals cycles would certainly play a role in there. But I think that because any sort of technical or cyclical analysis hinges on a significant amount of data, much of it measures mass psychology or mass social movement and other things that involve larger amounts of data to be able to really discern patterns in there. That things like lithium would be much more difficult. I would rely on other forms of analysis to really be trading or investing in that.
Do we have cycles in the cryptocurrencies?
They have given a bit on a monthly and weekly basis. The amount of mass participation that you've now seen in them, they have certainly displayed more consistent cycles. And Bitcoin, for instance, has been really demonstrating some textbook technical and cyclical moves, not only in cycles, but in wave theory and wave structure. Two of the primary things that I was looking for early in this year, or that I published early this year to be looking for, the first was a final wave surge up to about 66,000 in Bitcoin, which is right where it went and peaked. And as it was hitting that level, I described how it should go back to the low before that final rally, which for your Elliott wave aficionados is called the fourth wave of lesser degree. It was also a point of strong technical support, and it came into play right around 29,000 in Bitcoin. So as it was hitting 65,000, fulfilling the upside, the outlook was for a drop back to about 29,000, and that's where it should bottom for 3 to 6 months. Lo and behold, Bitcoin dropped into June, spiked below 30,000, hit the 29,000 level, retested it in mid-July. And from there, the outlook has been for a rally first up to about 42,000 and then ultimately up to 50,000. Bitcoin has adhered to that too. So there's certainly some technical and cyclical consistency that's starting to emerge in those markets, and I attribute that to the fact that there is much greater mass participation, therefore mass psychology, which is what technical indicators attempt to analyze and identify.
Do you see any geocosmic influences in the markets?
I know we talked about this a little bit last time too, and I definitely, when you talk about much larger natural cycles, there are definitely consistency in those type of cycles. In that realm, I would be looking at or discussing both things like your solar and sunspot cycles, a very consistent, approximately 11.2-year cycle. But I've also identified some very interesting, very intriguing correlations between that cycle and spikes or upticks in tectonic or geophysical activity. I came into this year describing why I thought 2021 and 2022 would see a surge in earthquake activity, most likely starting in mid-2021, and that would be followed, if these cycles continue to play out the way they have, with a spike or an increase in volcanic activity in 2022 to 2024. Well, it was kind of amazing to me that in the last couple months, you have really seen this surge or this spike in earthquake activity. For example, I discussed this in my last 2 to 3 months of my Inside Track monthly newsletter, talking about why I thought we'd see a spike in earthquakes start to begin around mid-year. And since July 1st, you've had just this series of, first it was your 6 to 7 magnitude quakes in Chile, in California, Nevada, Indonesia, Panama, a couple of them, the Philippines, New Zealand, another one in Indonesia. Then all of a sudden, in more recent weeks, things started to really ramp up with, first you saw an 8.2 in Alaska, then another 6.2 coming after that. Peru had 6+, India had 6+ magnitude. And then on August 13th and 14th, within just a 24-hour period, you had an 8.1 in the Sandwich Islands, then a 6.9 and a 6.4 in Alaska, then the 7.2 in Haiti that has really wreaked havoc there. And so it's a very strong validation of those cycles. There is the reality that earthquakes happen all the time, and that's often the first challenge that I'll get when I discuss things like that, which is why I make it very clear. I'm talking about you can look and you can identify when there is groupings or synergy of large magnitude quakes all in a very tight time frame that you can't really find at other times. It is more sporadic at other times, more isolated at other, or ebb and flow at other times. But then there are these periods over the decades, over the years, where you get a strong surge or spike in earthquake activity all around the globe. And when was the last time we really saw a concentrated thing like that? It was 2010, 2011, when you had major quakes in Chile, and it all culminated in early 2011 with the quake and tsunami and nuclear disaster in Japan. And so here we are 11 years later. Solar sunspot cycle is turning up at the same time. We're in the same phase of that. And I document that back many phases. And there's overriding cycles. There's been a 4-year cycle that has overlapped that and is coming together at this point in time. So there are certainly geophysical, geocosmic, solar cycles and reasons for that type of activity, but I don't think that a lot of your scientists and experts give that much credibility, even though it keeps happening.
Well, with this connection between solar activity and earthquakes and volcanoes, could it be particles from the sun, say neutrinos, that can go right through the Earth? Would they increase in volume and perhaps heat up the interior of our planet, causing these disasters?
Well, I would definitely think that all of the coronal mass ejections, CMEs from the sun on each of these solar storms, they have to have an impact. And I'm not a geologist, geophysicist, any of those qualifications, but from a mere observation standpoint, it's hard to argue that you've got not just coincidence, but probably causality. And again, I've shown where you have these spikes and synergy also of volcanoes. There are always volcanoes erupting around the globe at any point in time, but it's when you get a much higher concentration and higher intensity of them. That's what I'm applying the cycle analysis to, because that's when I want to see if there's some predictability and if there's some way to anticipate some of this. And my conclusion has been that yes, there is. It doesn't mean that you can sit and pinpoint an exact volcano that's going to go off on an exact day, but you can identify periods of time when there's a much greater increased probability for multiple quakes or multiple volcanoes, and ultimately that can have an impact on the markets and everything else about life. You even look at some of the impact that it has had in decades past on the power grid. You look at the 1989 storm in Canada, and there were not as serious but similar ones in the decades since then, where some of these sunspots and solar storms have impacted different parts of our grid and our technology on Earth, and the more dependent we become on them, that also means it can be a little bit of an Achilles heel at those critical times. And I would certainly be watching the next couple of years just with some heightened awareness. I'm not advocating a Chicken Little, yell the sky is falling, time to go off the grid type of thing. Just a time to be aware that you're in a higher risk situation, and even things like that can be a type of black swan event if they trigger a little bit of struggles in a certain region of the globe.
Eric, thank you so much for being on This Week in Money.
Thanks for having me back, Jim.
My guest has been Eric Hadik, CEO and president of InsideTrackTrading.com. He was speaking to us from the Chicago area. Coming up, Mark Leibovit next on This Week in Money.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRtrader.com. He's speaking to us from Arizona. Welcome back to This Week in Money, Mark.
My pleasure being back. And we're actually not getting any rain here. It's amazing. There's flooding and all kinds of stuff going on in Arizona, which yes, if you're not in Arizona, people don't pay much attention to, but it's an interesting time of year out here. And it's actually sort of nice because, it's hot, but we have, various degrees of elevation out here. And I know this is not a travel log, but, you can go from sea level up to 12,000 feet if you want to go up to Mount Humphrey and Flagstaff. But during the summers, you get what's known as the monsoons. And if you're up in the mountains, you get even more than you get down in the valleys, but you get some heavy rains and storms that come up during the day, and it's sort of nice because it cools things off. So it's not so bad being out in the desert, and you do get these interesting breaks, which people, unless you're out here and really experience it, and I've been out here since the late 80s, it's an interesting phenomenon. So just want to update you on the state of Arizona that, a lot of damage was done around here. The roofing industry is booming. Roofs are leaking everywhere. If you try to get a roof repaired, it takes 3 months. It's crazy stuff.
Mark, for people new to VRtrader.com, can you tell us about it?
Well, we're a technical newsletter, but I also am a contrarian and a cyclical analyst as well. I learned a long time ago there's more to the market than news stories and even just basic charting. You got to put a lot of pieces together. And the main focus was VR, the volume reversal, which is what the VR is all about, which is a technical tool that I learned and developed many years ago. I was inspired by another great technician who passed away. His name was Roger Cole, who I studied with when I was in my 20s, and when that's over 50 years ago. And basically it says, price and volume are important, and a change of volume and price simultaneously can trigger both a short-term trade or an intermediate move in the markets. And So VR, a lot of our trades are based on what I call these volume reversals, and it's up to the clients if they want to stick with them longer or shorter, but we tend to take more of a shorter-term viewpoint. But I'm also, as I said, influenced by cycles, including lunar studies, planetary studies that friends of mine produce, solar activity, all kinds of geocosmic stuff. So we're not immune to the forces of the universe, and we see key change points in the market. On lunar cycles, for example, we were having a full moon now, and the market hit a little bit of a trading bottom yesterday, and I wrote in the newsletter we were short, and usually a couple days from a lunar cycle, it could be a full moon, new moon, quarter moon. Markets can change direction, so we said, we had some short positions. I said, cover it. Maybe it's a bounce here because you're within 2 days of a full moon, and sure enough, the market was up today, and we made some money yesterday. If you recall, on Thursday, the market was down pretty sharply early in the day and recovered. So I think this has something to do with the lunar cycle as well. And, interesting stuff like this you just don't pick up in business courses at universities or certified financial analyst, certifications, or money management training. You don't get into this kind of stuff because it just doesn't make sense to people that there's other forces besides what's in the balance sheet or within the press release of some company. So, interesting stuff, and that's what VR is all about, and plus a lot of my own personal cynicism and experience and contrary thinking, which was influenced both by just observations and also by being a former floor trader and realizing that unfortunately markets are manipulated, and we just have to realize that we can make money if we recognize that that's happening. So good news at the top, generally is a good time to sell. Bad news, and they kill a stock at the time to buy it, and both are opposite of what people tend to do. So all those pieces are what we throw together. We're not perfect. We've done well for the clients. There are bad calls here and there. Nothing is perfect, but I consider myself a survivor. And having done this now for like almost 43 years and still doing it, we must be doing something right.
Mark, seeing as how you mentioned things like lunar cycles, and you like to talk about geocosmic events, we just talked to Eric Hadik, and he was saying we're into a geocosmetically interesting time. What's your point of view on this?
We definitely are. There's something cooking out there. Off air, we were talking about Zecharia Sitchin and the book that he wrote decades ago, The 12th Planet, and it was based on Sumerian studies, actual documents. I guess they were petroglyphs or whatever they were that he researched. About every 3,600 years, supposedly, there's another planet in our solar system that comes swinging around and can affect our planet in very significant ways. Now, whether that's happening now or not, but I read that book years ago, and there's stuff like this going on out there. We got the solar flare activity, as we saw back in the 19th century, where a giant flare could hit and could literally shut down the planet. We're watching, the lunar cycles, as I just mentioned as well, and there has been an increase in the earthquake and the volcanic activity. So there's something going on out there. The tremendous heat wave that we've seen this past summer, particularly in your part of the world, just in a lot of natural disasters, they're not being reported. I mean, you hear them talk about all kinds of news stories, and I turn on the general media, and they're just not being reported. But if you go research the internet or Twitter or Google, and you see all these disasters and things happening, or volcanoes going off, and all kinds of stuff, it just doesn't get any coverage. There's something on a planetary level that could be happening. There's speculation that there might be a possible polar shift underway, and God forbid that happens, because if the Earth shifts a couple of degrees, there could be 1,000-mile-an-hour winds, and it could destroy, civilization. So hopefully they're wrong about a polar shift. Of course, the great example of that could have been Antarctica, which at one point was a green, beautiful place, and now is under ice. So if you get a significant polar shift, the world is not the same world anymore. Minor polar shift, maybe that's happening. Could also change climate, and maybe that's part of what the so-called climate change is about. Maybe it's the Earth, they're shifting a little bit on its axis, and people attributing it to man-made events, but it could be, planetary in scale. So whether we're having a planetary event, Sitchin is right, in the 3600 planet, he calls it Nibiru, was supposed to be circulating around at some point. There's something like that out there. I have a strong feeling there's something happening, but, I can't give you the scientific measurements for it. But very interesting stuff occurring out there, and, I guess the bottom line is people listen to these broadcasts and say, well, what good is this stuff? How do I make money with this? It's supposed to be talking about economics in the stock market. Well, when you see commodity prices go up because of shortages or because of bad weather, that does affect your pocketbook, and it is a basis to make money. So these things are important, and we try to pay attention to them.
An item that caught your eye, a UFO cover-up, Tucker Carlson talking about it on Fox News. He said 80 years of cover-up. I guess he's talking about Roswell. And
a lot of other things. You're right. The interesting thing about it, and I become a big spokesman for this in my newsletter, which I shouldn't be because it's supposed to be a stock market and economic forecast platform, but it's been something that for decades I've been involved with avocationally. A friend of mine produced, I should say acquaintance because he's not a close friend, but produced the film Roswell back in the 1980s, and he gave me a lot of insight about what was going on in that event after he interviewed a lot of people that at that time who were still alive, who were threatened by the government if they said or spoke too much about what happened at the time. In fact, their lives were threatened, supposedly. I can't confirm this just based on my conversations with him. So going back, you mentioned Roswell, that's exactly what he was involved with. So I don't want to mention his name, but he was the producer of the film. And, I heard this back in the 80s, and I've been reading about and studying it well before that. And, it changes your life when you hear this type of stuff coming from people So there's other things going on out there. And, Tucker Carlson is, I'm proud of him, the fact that he's standing up and pointing this out. And, I've been, again, studying this for decades myself and have interviewed a lot of people. And I've talked about the existence of a secret space program, which is out there. I'm convinced of it based on the research I've done. Apparently we've got technology that may have been reverse engineered from alien craft that have crashed on the planet. Some of the stuff apparently goes all the way back to Nazi Germany, where apparently there was a crash in the Black Forest, and apparently some craft was reverse engineered. This is even before World War II. And of course we know Germans and Nazis had developed a lot of advanced technology, and they were way ahead of the U.S., and we brought all the Nazis over under that Operation Paperclip after World War II, and that became the basis of the United States space program. So we know they had a lot of advanced stuff. And apparently they even had a base of some operations down in Antarctica that started even before World War II. And we had sent a fleet of ships down there. I forget the name of the operation. And we were turned back. There was a conflict down there. We couldn't get the Nazis out of there, apparently. And apparently we built a lot of other bases down there at Antarctica. There's something tied to this secret space program and the Nazis and reverse engineering of spacecraft, something all tied to Antarctica, which is very complicated story, but that's part and parcel to all this. So, when we talk about the cover-up, it's really it's the biggest story of our lives. And, we don't want to take anything away from Vietnam and the Cold War and Afghanistan that's going on now, and all these things that people do suffer, and there are things that happen, and these all are important stories, but they are distractions from what's really going on. And what's really going on, in my opinion, is the governments, no matter what you hear officially, China and the U.S. are not getting along, and they're going to invade Taiwan, and we're going to go to war, or we're going to the Russians and the U.S. are going to blow each other into atomic smithereens because we have different political and sociological viewpoints and all this stuff. Meanwhile, at the highest levels, the governments are working together with interplanetary forces. They have bases in operation on the moon and on Mars. We have craft that were developed out of either reverse engineering or maybe out of Nazi technology that is so far advanced to anything that you see in the skies. In fact, what we're starting to see in the skies, some of these photographs that the Pentagon has released, may not be the alien craft, may be the reverse engineered craft that we have developed that can literally go from here to the moon in 20 minutes and service the bases that we have in operation there, for example. So I do believe there are the alien connections, and there's plenty of documents on, that could back that up. A lot of them were released under the Freedom of Information Act. A lot of it was didacted. They blacked out a lot of stuff. But if you really dive into it and study it, it's really incredible what's going on. And why is it incredible? Well, we have this advanced technology, and we're able to do and have what I believe we have. There's no reason for anything to be wrong on this planet. You can feed everybody. The technology is so advanced. Everybody could live well. We don't have to worry about wars and all this kind of stuff. I mean, literally, if we're able to go to operate planetary bases now or mine asteroids, which I believe is underway right now with this advanced technology, and bring back needed minerals and metals and things that can improve the quality of life here on Earth. Why are we doing this? Why was COVID created? Is it that we're just trying to distract people from these other events? Are we really trying to kill people on this planet? Is this some great plan? It's just amazing to me that all these stories are out there, but we have this other great story as well. So it's what the problem is, Jim, is that the problem is this goes back thousands of years. I mean, if you really study ancient history and text, and there's a great program on the History Channel here in the United States. It's on Friday evenings. It's called Ancient Aliens. And what they do is they really have gone back and researched ancient texts and all kinds of stuff, and you can see in the ancient scrolls and texts referrals to visitors from other worlds and advanced craft that were flying around and all kinds of crazy things that happened tens or hundreds of thousands of years ago on our planet. So the planet we know today is not the same that existed years ago. It could have been advanced civilizations that were destroyed. It could have been alien visitors that influenced the development of civilizations on Earth, the creation of the pyramids and all these other great ancient cities that could not have been built with the technology supposedly that existed at that time. So advanced technology might have been involved. So when I say Tucker Carlson refers to 80 years of cover-up, I mean, there are pictures you can see in medieval pictures of objects in the sky that are part of drawings and paintings that were observed, and there's thousands of these documents, and there's stuff that's going on here in the U.S. in the 19th century and in Canada that were reported. It's just that after Roswell, it became more acceptable, more prominent, but this is not a new phenomenon. So, we trade the stock market and we try to make money doing it, and we've been surviving and all these things, but in the background, we've got some stuff going on, which is literally science fiction, but it isn't science fiction. And we don't talk about it because we've been successfully brainwashed into being considered idiot or tinfoil people if we bring up the subject. I mean, they have done such a great job in suppressing the information and making fools of those who try to criticize them that it becomes almost a joke to even raise the subject. And I'm doing it here because I don't give a damn. Because I know too much, and I've seen too much. I've interviewed enough people, and you also get intuition about stuff too. And I'm pretty good with intuition because I made some significant calls financially and in the market, and I think a lot has to do with some common sense and intuition. So we have some stuff going on which is just fabulous. And my question is, will it ever really be exposed? Those who have control of this don't want it out. They want to keep it under their wings for whatever reason, because I guess what the reason is they want to control the planet, and they want to control. I mean, it's not just about making money. I mean, I guess if you can build bases on Mars and Moon and do all kinds of stuff, and perhaps have dealings with extraterrestrials throughout the galaxy, what does money mean at this point? I mean, now it's power. and control of the solar system, and things that we can't even begin to imagine in our day-to-day lives, just trying to pay our bills and have a family and survive. We're talking a scale which is just cosmic in terms of what our government and some key individuals are involved with. So this is the real story. The real story is not Afghanistan. It's not whether China invades Taiwan. It's not whether the dollar goes down or gold goes up, whether the stock market declines next year or not. It's what's going on a planetary level, intergalactic level, extraterrestrial level. And it's almost like the movie Star Wars exists right now. In other words, if you can just imagine the Star Wars craft flying around and dealing with alien creatures and all these scenes that you see in these movies, just imagine if that was real. That's not really fiction. That's what actually is going on. The United States space program, the one that Trump created, I mentioned this in a previous interview, they have this insignia, and I mentioned this on the previous interview, as I just said. The insignia for the United States space program is identical to the Star Trek insignia that you see Captain Kirk wear and all these on the shows. If you put them up on the screen, I actually put this on my website, they copied almost identically that insignia. So what's that all about? Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek, apparently was privy to some inside information and attended some secret government meetings. And I can't give you all the documentation about this because I'm not permitted to do this. I'd be jeopardizing other people's names and reputations. But apparently he was in on some of the meetings, overheard stuff that when they were investigating both the Roswell type information and others, and a lot of the stuff that was seen in the Star Trek films was supposedly replicas of what really happened or was happening. So I know someone who interviewed him directly and got a lot of this information. So, I mean, and like I say, it's like mind-blowing. You know, you're sitting here, and I'm watching the stock market, and I'm doing this great interview with you, and if even part of what I'm telling you is true, nothing else matters. I mean, it's just over the top. It's just over the top, and I just hope that those that are covering this up are brought to justice, and things change in our lifetimes, and hopefully quickly, because if they don't, it's going to be the same nonsense over and over again in terms of, covering up secrets and protecting the few and powerful and wealthy, and the masses not benefiting from the advances that are being made and the discoveries that are being made. And, why should we take airplanes that fly at, 500 miles an hour, 600 miles an hour when some of these craft are doing 100 times that speed? Well, why are we living? Why are we walking when they're? It's like saying why you walk when you have a jet plane to take. You don't need the covered wagon anymore. You've got a car. It's like that type of difference exists, but all we hear about is Elon Musk and SpaceX and Jeff Bezos jumping into a little craft for a little ride, and Bramson jumping up in his Virgin Galactic spacecraft, and we just get these little tokens of advancements that are occurring out there. I can't help but believe these guys don't know what I'm telling you is true, and then we're just giving little tidbits of information here, minute to minute, just to keep us going, so to speak. So, just a long-winded tirade here. It's just the tip of the iceberg, but it intrigues me, and it occupies a lot of my day. And I just hope that before I pass on to the next world, I'm able to see some of these things myself, and maybe I need to be taken to one of those moon bases or Mars bases myself, so I can experience the reality that I think already that exists.
Getting back to Earth, if we're not going to be mining asteroids anytime soon that we know about it, what's going on with gold right now? It's in trouble. And it's probably, it's temporary, I think. I've been bearish on it pretty much all year. I mean, we trade it. We try to trade it. All I can say is, I think there's more coming to the downside. Gold bugs don't like hearing this. I think silver is probably headed under $20, down to 19. I mentioned this in a previous interview, maybe lower. Maybe it's a big buy when it gets down there. We'll have to look at the charts. There's something about the overall pattern this year. Didn't make sense to me looking at the charts.
And back in February, I mentioned that I thought you could even see 1,500 before you saw it go higher, and we only got down to 1,660 or 75, and now we're hovering in the high 1,700s again. I wouldn't be surprised to see gold down to 1,350, 1,400, perhaps by the end of the year. Silver, well under $20, and we'll sort of take it from there. That's sort of where I'm at on it. And then, like anything else, these markets are manipulated. All markets are manipulated. So maybe they're going to drive us out so they can accumulate it to take it up next year and the year after, So we'll just have to wait and see. And one of my good friends, Terry Laundrie, I mentioned this in previous interviews, passed away a few years ago, and we were good friends. He lived in Nantucket, and he just, he created this tool called the Magic T back in the 1970s. Very interesting. He was an engineer. But anyway, in year 2000, I was talking to him, and this is 21 years ago, and he says his cycle said there will be the biggest top in gold in 2020. This is 20 years before it happened. Of course, a lot happened in between that. So far, the all-time high was in 2020. And he's not alive. I can't talk to him. I know if he modified his big cycle theory since then, whether there's another 20-year cycle coming and we're going to be up to 2040, and that was just a temporary top. And I look back at it, and everybody got all excited when gold broke 2,000 and went up there. And I keep saying, Terry kept telling me, watch out, 2020, based on his cycle work, could be the big top in gold. And so far, he's been correct. And this is not good news for all the gold bugs out there who are betting on 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, or that the world currency is going to be pegged to gold. I mean, I hear stories every day that gold's going to be suddenly tied to the U.S. dollar at some incredible price, like $10,000 an ounce, and suddenly that's how we back our debt, and we, support the debt because we value gold to what supposedly is really worth, and on and on and on. So I'm not saying these things can't happen, but you hear these stories, and these could just be distractions from the reality. Maybe there's so much gold out there, or it has so little usefulness, particularly with the cryptocurrencies now in existence, that gold isn't what it used to be. Before crypto, maybe it was. Time will tell. The charts tell me we need to be a buyer, and the cycles all come in. I'll jump in like anyone else. And my current view is, cautious optimism, I guess, going forward until we see a clear sign of a bottom.
Some people have suggested if the stock market makes a major correction, gold miners will be the place to be. What's your opinion?
Well, generally we see the miners do better first. I mean, that's been the pattern in the last, few decades since I've been involved in the business. It seems like the buyers of the shares sort of create like a leading indicator for the metal itself. I don't want to bet on that. I mean, the rules are made to be broken in this industry. People start believing one thing and they get too attached to it and it doesn't happen, or it misleads them. But in the past, that's been the case. So I'm looking at the charts, and the miners don't look so great to me. So until they start showing a clear turn back to the upside and provide hopefully a leading indicator, value, I guess I'm just a little cynical about it till I see some confirmation, but historically that has been the case. So let's see what happens. I mean, there's more happening with other metals. I mean, we're not talking about lithium, which has been doing really well. Palladium, which has been extraordinarily strong. And why? Because this is basis of the electrical vehicle industry. And the world of money is being put, trying to get rid of the use of carbon energy in transportation. So if you look at the palladium chart and the lithium chart, they're through the roof. Copper, of course, has been strong and corrected a little bit here in the last, couple of weeks. But, things that related to creating these new products, the new advanced technology products, the metals related to that seem to be, more an important subject than what gold and silver are doing.
I think a lot of people, when they talk about electric vehicles, forget the steel processing, the plastics used, and so on, still involve fossil fuels at some point. The rubber insulation on the wiring, the mining that'll take place for the copper, the lithium, the cobalt, the magnesium needed to make the cars. So fossil fuels aren't going to go away, maybe less use or less burning of them, but still in use.
Right, those that were so anti-oil, crude oil and so forth, don't realize that you need oil to produce just the things that you had referred to, like the rubber surrounding wiring and so forth. So, you need energy, and where's the energy going to come from to produce the lesser or more desirable energy result? And I guess that's one of the reasons why crude oil went up, and everybody was bearish on it. So it's not just related to people driving around in their cars. It has to do with the needed materials to create the newer advanced materials or vehicles that we're discussing. I don't know. I just have this feeling, the negative feeling toward the crude oil has done nothing more than create more of a buying opportunity for it. And you're liable to see extremely much higher prices in crude, and just when everybody thought it was going to go to zero, and the windmills and the solar panels were going to replace all that. That's not happening so fast. Maybe in the next 100 years or 200 years, not now. I mean, crude could be $200 an ounce in the next 10 years. It could go way up there, and then maybe 100 years from now it's back down again. But the demand and the need for that, and the fact that so much production was cut back, and a lot of the companies that were involved in the industry, got scared when they start hearing the green energy people and the legislation that they're supposedly going to invoke and stop, airplanes from flying, and they're worrying about cows emitting too much gas out in the in the dairy fields. All this nonsense we're hearing, but, if you're a corporate executive running one of these big companies, you might cut back on production or cut back on spending money to drill for new resources, and what's the end result of that is higher prices. So it may backfire, and has already backfired on those who are supposedly so green energy oriented, who are short-sighted and don't understand that everything fits together. There's no single item that could replace everything else. So very interesting stuff out there. It's a fun business, Jim. Really a lot of idiots out there, but the smart people like you and me that can make money when we find out how idiotic they are.
The anti-fossil fuel people, okay, fine, but what's your alternative? Can it work right now? And I always enjoy the protesters who show up on major intersections in Vancouver, it seems, every weekend to protest fossil fuels, but you're wearing synthetic clothing, synthetically sold shoes, you're wearing leather belts and other leather items. Where are you going to get your clothing? And did you get there by transit that's powered by a diesel bus? How are we going to live? Canada's the second coldest country in the world. We have vast distances to travel. Public transit only serves a tiny fraction of the nation. What about construction companies? Are they supposed to put their transit mix, cement mixers on SkyTrain in Vancouver or on the Loop in Chicago? Have they thought these things out? It's always nice to have alternatives, but that alternative has to be there.
Absolutely. So, there's a little bit of a mental illness involved with all this too. There was a great video that I posted to my website, and I'll try to put it out again over the weekend. Basically about how like mental illness what's the expression? Liberalism is a mental disorder. That was the title of Michael Savage's book about 10 years ago. It's like there's a certain level of mental illness involved when you start believing the way these people are believing, and it's like they accept an idea without questioning the facts. And it overpowers their thinking. It's like they lose any logical thought anymore. They just become robots repeating things people are telling them without checking things out. So unfortunately, I know a lot of people who are like that. Some of whom I'm related to, unfortunately, who are just mental midgets in terms of evaluating the facts and trying to understand if what you're saying really makes sense and what you're doing really makes sense. So anyway, this is the world we live in, Jim. We're having a lot of fun talking about it. Whether we can change these people or not, that's a whole other event. So I'm telling you that this is part of this mental illness that you're referring to people on the streets parading about energy and how we need to be more self-sufficient, but we don't need any of the items that they're using themselves every day. It's just like mass illness out there, and a lot of it is propagated by the press. And for what reason? You know, they're trying to destroy civilization. I mean, this is like the Nazis burning the books. You know, you're going to start changing everything for everybody else because you don't believe in it. So anyway, this is the Ben and Jerry story. It's totally left field for me to bring that in, but it's sort of part and parcel to the same thing. I was just reading about it this morning. I mean, these guys, what the heck are they doing and saying? It makes no sense to who they are, their background, or the real truth about what's happening. And the same thing for people that are out there trying to condemn crude oil and change our ways of life and pull down statues and try to rewrite history because they don't like the history that existed, so let's just get rid of it. What is that all about? It's got to be nothing less than mental illness. I mean, one of the greatest tragedies in human history was the burning of the Alexandria Library, a couple thousand years ago, where we lost tremendous amount of scientific research and stuff. I mean, I think Carl Sagan said this before he passed away. If the Alexandria Library wasn't destroyed, we already would be in galaxies of way away from Earth and way advanced in our civilization. That's how much we lost by the burning of the Alexandria Library, was it 2,000 years ago? I mean, the stuff that was there.
Yes, all of man's scientific and medical knowledge of 5,000 years. The Egyptians were doing open brain surgery. They must have had a system to do it.
Right. So I'm saying we lost, by you disagreed what was in it, so burn the building down, and you set civilization back 2,000 years. And that's what these idiots are doing right now. They can just, up to them, they destroy, anything that they disagree with. There's a lot of truth and untruths out there about the vaccinations and the COVID. We can spend 2 hours on this subject, but anything that disagrees with the standard line is blackballed and removed, and you're condemned for raising it. I mean, getting off on a whole other tangent here. I mean, there are problems with the vaccine. They weren't properly tested. There have people that have died from it. There's hemorrhaging occurring. There's people that stand out and say there's something wrong here, but they're condemned for even bringing it up. Doesn't mean the vaccines can't be good and improved and develop properly over time and create the result that was originally intended. But there's something wrong and it's questioned. It's immediately challenged and suppressed. This is a part and parcel to the same subject we're now discussing anyway. So anything anyone disagrees with, whether you pull down the statue or you shut down the media that tries to present an alternate viewpoint, is condemned and closed. And that does nothing but set back civilization. And that's what's happening, unfortunately, right now.
The U.S. dollar, what kind of an outlook does it have?
It still seems to be strong and holding up here. All the bears want it to go down and feel like it has to go down because we're printing money like crazy, and all the common sense, answers would say weak dollar, and or the lesson over time is that currencies all go to oblivion. I mean, no currency lasts forever. The Great British Pound is way down from where it used to be. The dollar's lost 97% of its value since the Federal Reserve was created. I mean, over time, currencies do depreciate in value because governments are mismanaged. They print too much money. Democracy seems to go to hell when people realize they can vote money for themselves. The whole story, on and on and on. So it makes sense that the dollar should go down and continue to go down the way the country and the treasury and the budgets are being mismanaged. But on the short term, it seems to be a sort of a bastion of strength. Maybe it's the last horse in the glue factory, as the expression goes. The best horse in the glue factory. But for the time being, short term, it seems to be still showing some resilience. And the fact that gold looks lower to me probably makes sense that the stronger dollar is probably going to stay here for at least the short term, and we'll just have to evaluate it day to day. So and also. The dollar tends to do better under Democratic U.S. administrations and weaker under Republican administrations. So as long as the Democrats are in, the stronger dollar probably also makes sense based on history.
What's your view on Bitcoin right now?
I love it. I think it's going to the moon. I think, except for the possibility, and I would say maybe even likelihood of a correction here into the end of the year. But the trend's up. So, it depends if you're a trader or you're a long-term player in it. I think you have to have an allocation in the cryptos, just like the money managers say you have to have so much in bonds and so much in gold and so much in real estate. It's just an asset allocation decision. If I had my perfect scenario, you got Bitcoin around $45,000. I like to see it. It got down to about 27,000. I like to have seen it down to about 18 or 19,000 and then go up. It could have already seen the low. But if I had to create an ideal scenario, I like to see it sell off back to 20,000 and then from there go to 100,000 or even higher. So we'll know how it plays out here in the last quarter of the year. But it could have already seen its lows. It's acting okay here. Ethereum is acting okay. We'll see how it plays out here into the fourth quarter. So you have to be prepared for some volatility just in case it does sell off again first. But I think the big picture comment is I would bet on Bitcoin being 100,000 before it goes to 1,000.
Mark, do you have a special offer for people who have listened to this show?
If you go to vrtrader.com, that's VictorRobertTrader.com, and you go to any of the newsletters and you order, get on the order page, there's a promo code spot there, and you enter 2021 half off, 2021 HALF off, and you get 50% off of any of the newsletters for whatever time frame you sign up for, 2021 half off.
Mark, thank you so much for being on This Week in Money.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jim.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as vrtrader.com. He was speaking to us from Arizona. And that wraps up our show for this week. We'd like to thank our guests, Ross Clark, Eric Hadik, and Mark Leibovit. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions for the show or for our guests, we'll gladly ask that question for you if you send it to info@housestreet.com. Now, stand by for a company showcase update from American Manganese CEO and President Larry Reaugh. I'm Jim Goddard. We'll be back next week with more This Week in Money.
Comments made on This Week in Money are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com. This Week in Money is a production of House Street Media Incorporated. Executive producer is Tom Allen. Welcome to Company Showcase, an advertising feature on HouseStreet.com.
I'm Jim Goddard. I'm speaking with Larry Reaugh, CEO and President of American Manganese. Welcome back to the show, Larry.
Thanks, Jim.
Larry, people know with the push for electric cars, they're going to need a source of metals for all the batteries needed. Why is American Manganese one of those solutions to that?
Yeah, because we can recycle 100% of those special metals, and so that cuts down on having to mine them. It gives you a steady supply because eventually there will be a steady supply of batteries and scraps to be processed, and so we could be a big part of that solution. I think we're also, big part of every solution. We have a closed-loop technology that allows us to reuse the water, so we're not in dry climates. We're not going through a lot of water except through evaporation, and getting back 100% is kind of our goal. I mean, we've gotten that in a lot of tests so far. So, and that's 100% in recoveries and purities. So it's, I think we're on the leading edge of the technology for this sort of thing that these battery manufacturers are going to require. And not only that, but the owners of electric vehicles and concerned citizens want to know what's going to happen with the batteries when they're reached the end of life. Well, they can be reused immediately. We want to have a recycling plant that attaches to a gigafactory, and anytime there's scrap material available, we can reproduce the cathode materials that go into the battery right there on the spot. And So there's no transportation, there's nothing involved in extra costs, and it's a solution that is going to have its day in the sun.
Larry, for people new to American Manganese, can you explain exactly what the company's all about?
Well, it's a critical metals company that developed the process of with patents on patents on processing very low grades, 2 to 3% of manganese. That's what the U.S. has abundance of. We're actually doing work for the Department of Defense on the Wenham stockpile. So we hope to have the final results here very soon, and and then hopefully we'll get to move on to the next phase. And but what I really want to talk about, Jim, is I've gotten a lot of emails over the last week, and some from concerned shareholders that because of the prevalence of predator trading, they're wondering whether they should sell their stock. And of course, that's the whole idea of the predators, is to get the shareholders to sell. And I said, basically, I'll go through an explanation of it. Back in 2012, when I recognized that it was short traders that were taking the market down so rapidly, and it wasn't just my company, it was everything that was on the board was getting shorted. And it became the home run for predator traders or short traders. And when they got rid of the uptick rule here in Canada, which means there's no short rule, so there's no requirements actually, unless a brokerage firm requires it. And I haven't seen a lot of that where they borrow the stock. I know there's a lot of shorting goes out of one of the houses that holds a few million of my shares, and they've never been borrowed. So it's a prevalent problem. That how do you get over it? And what I finally reached this idea that the solution was we were $0.015 to 2 cents at that time. And I would get people to buy $0.015, 2 cent shares, and they later became millionaires just on their holdings at 30 cents. And because the stock took a jump in 2016 to 35, it settled in 20 to 30. And we raised all the money we needed to get our patents, to do the R&D, and we still have lots of money in the till right now to complete all that work. We're just around the corner from everything being completed. There hasn't been a lot of press releases lately because everybody was locked in, and this is the summer months. It's not only the summer doldrums. The summer doldrums are created by the fact that people are on holidays. And people are on holidays, so your level of work and turnaround goes down. And so it's not a good month for news, but we'll have news. We certainly are not sitting on any bad news. And I say that because I could be sued if we were, and the fact of the matter is we're not. So going back to the predator trading, what's the solution? Well, I tried going down and talking at special meetings and everything about the stock market, bringing literature and down with me and piling it up at the end of the room, getting up and talking about predator trading, and all I got was almost booze. And but the fact of the matter was we started writing about it, myself and Dan McGordy, back in 2012-13. We made a few of the national papers, and but other than that, nobody was interested in listening. Certainly, CEOs I talked to were not interested in what I had to say. And so, basically it was kind of a one-man fight as far as I can see. There might have been maybe 3 or 4 other CEOs that tried to battle the uphill battle of going after the predators through the exchanges and IROC, and but nothing was satisfactory in that direction, and everything was legal now to actually short the stock. Why wouldn't you? You're a broker, and why would you go around making phone calls to your clients to buy an IPO or something? They just basically, all they had to do was sell stock every day. That's not a hard job, and and make money. So we're under that. We're under that, and how do you beat it? Well, we collectively bought a lot of stock in the 1.5, 2 cent range And not myself. I actually had to sell 1 million shares in 2015 to keep the listing requirements up, and I certainly am hurting from that. And but I've still got a lot of stock, and I think that it's going to be the big winner at the end of the day. I can't see anything but it being a winner. We're in the eye of the storm here. We've got patents on our process. It's people try to belittle the patents and all that, but it happens to be that I see at least, and that's just from one publication, 10 or 12 patent applications every day from major battery manufacturers, EV car manufacturers, the whole works, and they believe in patents, and so do I. So I think that what I would say to the guy that was wondering whether he should sell the stock, even though he recognized that's what they wanted him to do, and I would say to him, don't. I had some shareholders have been with me for a few years in the 20-cent range, and the big campaign on the bull boards pretty much destabilized them, and they sold their stock, and it was only 2 or 3 weeks before the stock ran to $2.86. Now, if you had 1 million shares and you sold them, now you've just missed out on, you sold them for, at 20 cents you might get $200,000, and you sold them and missing out on a potential profit there of, say, $2.5 million on 1 million shares. And, that kind of breaks your heart to see that sort of thing happening. And, but, if you've tried to get them to hold in there, if they keep getting to you and you can recognize where their concerns are coming from the bull boards, the CEO boards, you recognize the pattern, and, they pretty much made up their mind before they phone you, so they go ahead and sell. And, it's unfortunate that they missed out on the big win after waiting 2 or 3 years. And, it's something I don't like to see happen. Now, just to give you an example, I'm looking at retirement in the next couple of years. What am I going to do? Blow all my stock out and have cash in my account? Well, I'm concerned about having cash in my account because, we have heavy-duty inflation, and that inflation could affect the value of my cash. It could go down rapidly to zero, and so that exposes you to another risk. So what I would do, and this is after a lot of careful thought, what I would do is I would sell enough to make sure all my bills were paid for, and I had, a few $100,000 or $1 million in the bank to look after extraordinary things, and I'd keep the rest in shares. Why would I keep them in shares? Well, I've worked hard to develop this company into where it is today, and I think that the best investment out there, as far as I'm concerned, and I don't have to research it, I've been with it every step of the way, is ownership in the AMI shares. So I would never sell all my stock. I probably wouldn't even sell half. So what it really does is that I feel like I'm protected that way. Unless there's a shift in management where I can see policy changes coming up, and that usually fucks up a company, and then I might be a seller of the stock, but not until I saw that developing. It's hell. Why would I go anywhere else to buy ownership in a company that I have to do due diligence on? And then I have to get to know the management of, so that I know that they're square away people. And why wouldn't I keep shares in the company that I helped build? So that's kind of where I'm at. What I'm really saying is, sure, if it goes up to say $4 or $5 and you want to sell some, sell them, but don't sell it all, because then you'll be looking around for something else to buy, and you could lose that cash in a real jiffy. So, keep a little bit in the shares that you've ridden for. Some of these guys have been involved in in the market for close to 15 years, and I find that some of them are the most critical of what I do than anybody else. Nobody else would have taken a 1.5 cent stock unless they rolled it back and gave it a new start in life. Now we've got 217 million shares outstanding, which is the kind of float that institutions like to see. That's a minimum float, and because they want to be able to get in and out of the stock. They don't want to, be stuck, with a illiquid stock. And so that's the next move that we're going for, is we're going to try to attract more and more institutions into the stock, and that spreads out the risk. It gives us a lot of exposure, and it's kind of the way to go. Now, I had a whole bunch of things written down which I never read because one of the things I didn't mention was the fact that we now use a lot of social media. We're not into hiring IR because how does IR bring in the kind of buying that we need? I want to spread it around amongst a large group of people rather than consolidate it in a few hands. And because a large group of people, when they sell, they don't sell all at the same time. When they buy, they don't buy all at the same time. So you have an orderly market, and I see nothing but a great future going on. I know it's below $1 right now. I looked at the average price. It was about just under 98 cents on the day, but I haven't seen the close yet, and it doesn't mean that that's the last price you'll see, because for some reason or another, 15 minutes after, and I got real time, 15 minutes after the reported position of the stock and the last price, all of a sudden a few thousand shares come through at a lower price. And that happens too often, and so everything's rigged in the favor of predators, but you can get around that. We've gotten around it twice, and we'll get around it 3 times. And the biggest thing is keep your head down, your ass up, and do the right job. You make sure that you're doing things that the end product user wants. That's the battery manufacturer, not what you think they want. And so that's what we work towards, is giving them what they want.
Larry, where can people get more information about American Manganese, and where are you traded?
American Manganese has a website out there, AmericanManganeseInc.com. All our press releases are on there. We do about 40 or 50 a year, even though the guy on the billboards that keeps bashing the company acts like we put nothing out but crap. And but nothing could be further from the truth. As far as I'm concerning, they're not just maligning the company and the management, they're also doing the same thing to Cometco, and that's a shame. So but they can get all the information they need from that. We're traded on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol AMY. We're traded in the US QB board under the symbol AMYZF. And we're traded in Frankfurt under the symbol 2AM. You can contact the company or contact me at LREAUGH@AMYMN.com, or you can phone 778-574-4444.
Larry, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome.
We've been speaking with Larry Reaugh, CEO and President of American Manganese. I'm Jim Goddard. Our conversation took place on August 20th.
Comments made on Company Showcase are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at HowStreet.com. Company Showcase is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.